Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Message Heard and Not Received Lessons from Water Rescues. This webinar is part of the education outreach conducted by the Vermont Water Safety Action Committee. If you enjoy the content today, be sure to sign up for our upcoming symposium in March. We've put a lot of dedicated work into planning that out, and we're grateful for all participation. Today we have Mike Cannon here with us, and I will hand it over to him to introduce himself and the important and compelling work that he does. Thank you again for being here today.
Thank you, Annie. Thanks again for having me today. My name is Mike Cannon. I currently work for the State of Vermont Department of Public Safety. I'm the program manager for the State Urban Search and Rescue Team. And in my volunteer world, I manage Colchester Technical Rescue, which is a volunteer technical rescue team in the town of Colchester. And I have done that since about 1989. I've been a water rescue instructor for swiftwater, floodwater training since the early 90s. I am not an expert, is my disclaimer. I've been to a fair number of flood, drowning, and water rescue events over my tenure. And I always find something else new to learn on every one of these. So I was asked to present a brief webinar on at least some of the things that we've seen, the lessons that we've learned, and some of the calls that we've been able to dissect and see exactly why they did happen. And I think I'm having an issue with forwarding these, Abby. Oh, no, there we go. So what is a lesson? Well, obviously lessons are lots of things, right? It's a piece of instruction. Readings are exercises that we study, something learned by study or experience. I experience, and as do members of our team, all of these bullet points on what we do in life. Some of the most important lessons that we learn are from what we see and what we do and what we've been placed into. We talk about, a close call. In our world, we trace close calls. There are national databases that chase drowning injuries, drownings themselves. I like to think about what I do, and I look at drownings with rescuers, and some of the drowning accidents that have happened where these rescuers were either injured or ultimately drowned. We know that there's approximately 9,000 drownings each year, and there's probably at least twice to three times that many near drownings. In my world, seeing 12 rescuers die each year or become injured is crazy, and we as rescuers can do better jobs. And I think sometimes we don't listen to lessons that are learned and heed some of the advice. No one is drown proof. That is true. Even rescuers are not drown proof. Water doesn't discriminate, as we've seen all too many times. In Vermont, we lose about 8 to 12 people a year in waterways, and that could be from drowning in a backyard pool, drowning in some type of a commercial operation pool, or waterway, rivers, or lakes. Most of these areas have safety warning signs. Some are well broadcast through media. And then others are just tragic accidents that we think about, and we'd like to think that we could be better prepared or do a better way of making that accident not happen right in the future. And most, if not any of these victims, none of them are really wearing life jackets. It's very uncommon to find a victim wearing a life jacket. I can think in my 35 plus years of doing this, I've recovered one person in a life jacket who died from hypothermia in Lake Champlain. So it's very uncommon to run across folks in life jackets. A lot of these are familiar locations to us. I mentioned swimming holes. Our teams in Vermont respond regularly to mountainous swimming holes. The one thing that is even hard to train rescuers with is that water, water has a way of finding its own way. We can't change it. Water is wild. You can recognize some of the dynamics to these waterways, and you can predict a lot of things in the waterways in regard to how we're going to rescue people, but you can't change the water the way it's flowing. We want to avoid these dangerous water holes. We want to be in tune with the water conditions, which a lot of these victims, for whatever reasons, aren't in tune with the water conditions. Some of these victims swim alone. We preach never swim alone, always have a buddy system. We talk about not swimming below waterfalls or above waterfalls. We talk about knowing your swimming ability. It's not uncommon for us to interview victims' friends or family and have them say to us that they were strong swimmers. It's difficult to swallow that as a rescuer, to hear that come from a family member. But sometimes these people don't know what their swim ability is, and they could be strong swimmers, but in reality, the water conditions overwhelm them. We often think about of the summer months, but we also look at ice dynamics and local conditions, because sometimes we're called to ice rescues where there are either single or multiple victims that have fallen through the ice. We talk about heeding the warnings. Well, this slide kind of popped into my head that I had in my photo libraries. Here we have 4 or 5, trained rescuers at some level wading through floodwaters. We see a car that's, in the water, and they're wearing firefighter structural, pants and traffic vests. I don't see any life vests on any of these. They're walking through flooded waters on a roadway that might contain obstacles that are dangerous to us. A simple manhole cover that gets flushed off because of the sewer system could take any one of these rescuers down into a sewer system that they might not be able to survive from. We obey signage, don't drive through water. We want to listen to what media and public safety messaging is. A lot of it is, if you're in vulnerable areas, we want you to move from those vulnerable areas. Know what your local water conditions are. And it's easy for me to preach move from the area that might be flooded. A lot of the people that we deal with are vulnerable type adults, and they might not have the means to remove themselves from their home, both by financial means or medical conditions, or just by not wanting to leave. When we talk about lessons learned, we often visit, some of these mountain water swimming areas, these water holes. In July of 23, we lost a couple of people in some of these mountainous areas. And we talk about, these lessons that are learned. Most of these swimming holes have ample signage. And a lot of the people that lose their lives there, while some might be familiar with the area, some aren't. In July of 23, we lost a 23-year-old Connecticut individual who jumped in fast moving water. And the signs laid out what the conditions are at these holes and in this specific hole when the water was moving. The signs are not red, right? Maybe they are red. We will never know. But this sign at this particular hole says that 4 people were drowned here. Someone updated the sign to list it as 5 people, but it talked about fast currents, foamy and frothy water, submerged and slippery rocks. The area agencies do a pretty good job at trying to push out media information when the weather is warm. They might have had a lot of rain in those particular areas to try to educate the public on the dangers and hazards at these swimming areas. Again, in 2023 in July, a 25-year-old female is lost at the Huntington Gorge, just a very short distance from the previous swimming hole that we reported on. And weather conditions that day were not conducive for swimming. This was right in the middle of Vermont's historic flood in July. And this water way was running fast, high, murky. And again, the temperatures were in the 80s, so people want to try to recreate in them. There's, again, more than ample signage at this location to talk about the hazards associated with it. And this one particular gorge has seen dozens and dozens of deaths in the same areas due to the same conditions. And again, the media had done a more than a great job talking about the flood, covering the flood hazards, as well as the state waterways running high as a result of the flooding. Just a week or so later, again, in this same community, in the town of Richmond, Vermont, a family of 3 decided that it was a great idea to go tubing. The weather was warm, but the river in question was running extremely high. They were running in some homemade tubes that or not homemade tubes, but tubes that you would buy at a recreational type store that you could use for swimming or pulling behind a boat. And we're recreating down the Winooski River, and came upon a strainer of very large trees. Some of them had been recently placed there from the flooding a week before, but they didn't know how to approach that strainer. They didn't know how to handle themselves in that water, and the water was moving at a pretty good speed because of the floods. And they all got sucked into the strainer. The tubes flipped. I spoke with the family after they were pulled from the island where they ended up finding safe refuge, and they all were sucked under the strainer. They all thought they were going to die, and miraculously, they were all flushed out. This was a great outcome, even though it wasn't the outcome that I would have liked to seen. We would have liked to seen them not even be in the river that day. But to listen to them talk about what was going through their head when it happened are stories that we've heard from other people in near drowning instances. This is a picture of what the river looked like. And when we pulled up with our volunteer rescue team that was called to that area, there were still propane tanks from the flooding that were floating down the river. And for me or other people on the team that have been to many of these, it was pretty common sense for us to say that, wow, we wouldn't even want to be out there in this type of a situation. So sometimes, even though the signs are there, you gotta wonder, are they really read? Are they really comprehended? A short video here on not diving through the water. I pulled this from our archive from the flooding in July. While I'd like to say that it's thankful that there were no students on this bus, I believe that this bus was being taken to safe refuge. But it's flooding, it's driving through some pretty high water. There is some current there. And just the optics of this to be pushed through the press, to see a school bus being driven through water and orchestrated by a couple public safety folks, the optics, while we don't know exactly the reason for this, again, the optics aren't what we really want to push out there into the public. And yes, everybody in this video survived, but it's just not what we want to really be laying out there to the public. Again, during the July floods, I'll share these videos with you. There's 2 of them. This was a water rescue team that was brought in on a mutual aid state-to-state agreement. They're operating from Bedford, New Hampshire Fire Department, for an elderly woman who had not driven around a road closed sign, but had driven in water that was covering a roadway. She was determined that she was going to get to the airport and catch her plane. She was in her 70s. After speaking with her, she really didn't even comprehend the danger that she was in. She was swept off the roadway, and the only reason she didn't end up drowning and having her car swept further away was that the car became lodged on a large boulder on the side of the roadway. And this video was FaceTimed to me at the time of the occurrence by one of the incident commanders from the local fire department that was there. And I'm familiar with this area. It floods often. And I had in my mind that she was not going to live through this incident. I did not know the car was wedged against a rock on the side of the roadway. And that is the only thing that saved her, other than the remarkable boating skills and water rescue skills that this team did that evening. This is an incredibly dangerous operation for even the most water rescue teams. The light you see shining down there is her with her cell phone. This river is out of its banks. The river normally flows underneath that steel truss bridge. And again, this is at, I can't remember what time. It's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And you just can't see debris, trees, or other objects coming down the river. So, you know, to even function at one of these events is very, very high risk for these teams. This video is after she had been taken from her vehicle. The rescue team actually beached their boat on the roadway and were able to walk in a safe eddy to the vehicle and remove her, get a life jacket on her, and bring her back to the shoreline where the rescue operation had started. You know, and I share these with the group because these are rescues that are often performed in darkness in some remote area that the public or even us as professionals really don't get a chance to see and understand the complexity of it. Again, a safe rescue, but only done by a really well-trained, seasoned team. Again, signs ignored. The flooding in July again during one of the daytime flood incidents that we responded to with my state hat. The picture you see is a drone video of one of our urban search and rescue drone teams that was assigned to one of our swiftwater boat teams that was operating up in a very mountainous area. The river was out of its banks, obviously. Some of these homes, the water level was right up to the roof. A trucker in a tractor trailer unit had ignored signs and driven down the roadway and made a 911 call indicating that his truck was submerged. He was on the roof of his tractor trailer, and he did not know if he was going to be able to stay there. At one point, waters overwhelmed the tractor trailer. It came above the roof line. So that tells you how high the water was. And he saw an object floating by. He didn't know what it was, but he thought it would be a better, safe refuge than the truck that he was on. So that's a drone shot of him where the orange circle is. He is on an upside down hot tub that had become that floated loose from someplace upriver, and is wedged against a couple small trees there. We have a couple rescue teams that are trying to make it to him. Our state urban search and rescue team had a swiftwater boat team that was actually the closest team to him. It was within a quarter mile, which is where this drone launched from. The water conditions were too hazardous for them to launch a swiftwater inflatable boat. So another team from a volunteer organization farther south, they traveled about 9 miles to this location. They actually commandeered several private vehicles in order to get to the scene. They weren't able to bring any of their boats because of such the distance that they traveled. It wasn't physically possible because of the waterways and the lily pads of dry land and flooded areas that they had to get through. This is the video of them making their way there along some flooded railroad tracks. Again, a lot of people didn't normally see this. Rescuers captured it themselves with the GoPros that they had on their helmets.
Good, Corey.
This was a multi-person crew that was working their way to effect that rescue. You know, and I think that this is pretty remarkable business in my world. This is, again, a very well-trained, capable swiftwater rescue team. Again, they have made it to that location, but they don't have a boat. So they now realize that they have to effect a go rescue or a swim rescue, which is one of the most dangerous things that a water rescue team does. This is some video of one of the highly trained water rescue instructors in this team that teaches on a national level, who was swimming to the victim with a life jacket to try to get that secured to him so that they can pull him back to safety. You know, this is a exhausting rescue for the most fit rescuer. You know, he was able to, able to effect that rescue, and they were able to pull him back with a rope system. He and the victim, and he was still swimming with the victim to get them back to shore. Again, just an amazing rescue in my world. Again, lessons learned. We have a typo here. It was 2024 on this slide. Thin ice conditions, Lake Champlain in Vermont. Again, another climate winter for us. Normally, during this time of year, the ice would be feet thick. It was very, very unstable, very thin ice. Some areas had thick ice that were capable of supporting people or a fishing shanty, but some areas did not. We have 3 people die over a 3-day period from falling through thin ice on Lake Champlain. Again, the deaths were preceded by at least 2 weeks worth of unseasonably warm temperatures. 2 of the deaths were fishermen that were driving a UTV type sport vehicle. And they were warned actually when they went onto the ice that the ice was really, really safe. And some of the comments that they'd made back that they'd been fishing there for years, they were well in tune with what the ice conditions were. So again, you know, signs not read. And the National Weather Service in our area really does a great job, as well as the State Department of Public Safety, publishing ice conditions. The State of Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife also does an amazing job of putting media footage and media press releases out there as far as what the current ice conditions are. And those messages had been relayed the weeks prior to this triple drowning incident, or these triple drownings. So again, you know, we have to ask ourselves, I think we do a very good job collectively, whether it's the injury prevention system that we have in place, or the aquatic safety programs that are out there. I really think that we do a good job trying to get the message across of what is safe and what is not safe. And I think that it all depends on whether these people really want to digest that or not. You know, and I think that the only mistake that we all make in life is that the lessons that are not learned. You know, I can tell you there have been many instances where I think that we have been lucky, myself, my teams, the people on the team, to be able to come back and talk about what failed, what worked well, and what we would have done differently. You know, and I think, you know, this sign, which is at one of our busy swimming holes in this state, really spells it out, you know, and I don't think that we can make it much clearer. This particular swimming hole has at least 4 or 5 of these signs at all the entry points. So, you know, at least in the rescue world, which is what I do and what we do, you know, again, I think that we collectively try to do a really good job, and I think that we do push out a pretty good product, you know, and, you know, we meet on these webinars in Vermont, pretty regularly, and we struggle, I think, as a group to try to determine how we can re-engineer what's already been engineered as far as safety. And again, you know, these deaths are going to happen. I understand it. But I don't know what else we can do, at least in my world, to try to get the point across that some of this activity might not be safe, or that there are safe areas where you can do some of these recreating activities. And that concludes my slide program for the day, and I would welcome any comments or questions. Annie?
Thank you so much, Mike. It's so important and valuable to learn directly about both the messages we have in place and the results of the fact that the message is received but not heard. We are open to any questions. You can either place them in the question and answer box you see at the bottom of your screen. You can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand with the button in Zoom to ask a question. Is there anyone here? There's 20 of us. I'm so excited about how many people find value. I don't see anybody with a hand up yet. I have an open question to the room. Does anyone here have any comment about what